I've had a place here for 12 years now. And then I was part-timing in Berlin for 3.5 years before the changes. So yeah, but no complaints. Where are you geographically at the moment?
I guess you were out here for a while.
My New York time. 89 I was in Hoboken. 90 I was on Murray Street. 91, 2, 3 I was in Williamsburg. 96, 7 I was in Turtle Bay. 98, 99, 2001, and part of 2002 was in Tribeca. And then I went to D.C., and now I'm in San Francisco.
Early 90s Williamsburg, I'm guessing, is very different than today Williamsburg.
Yeah. Yes. What once was, sanitation company controlled, burned out car waterfront is now, yet another blue bottle coffee.
Sanitation control in the sort of Sopranos sense of the phrase.
Perhaps, yes. I mean, I used to live a block from the Montes, which was their Tuesday night was their busiest night when they were closed. So yeah,
What brought you out to San Francisco originally, and what's more or less kept you there?
San Francisco, I left New York in 2002 and went to D.C. and had a great time. D.C. is a wonderful city. It was during the W years, so it was a little bit of a war machine, but I made the most of it. San Francisco is a place, I started coming out here in the summer of 81, with Hüsker Dü. That was our first sort of summer touring destinations, through Canada and San Francisco. And 40 years ago, I fell in love with it. And I had a friend who still has a place here in the Mission, and he had a spare room. And he's like, well, you ever thought of living out here? And I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll take you up on that. And, spent the better part of the year looking for my own place, based out of his spare bedroom in the Mission, and found a nice little place. And yeah, it's just always loved the city. I love the weather. It's traditionally been a really, really artistic, creative place. I mean, obviously there's a huge, LGBTQ plus community here. So historically, and a little less so these days, but it's a great place to have as home base right now.
I've been in New York for probably around 15 years at this point, and had never really seriously considered leaving or going back home, which is, ostensibly the greater San Francisco Bay Area. But then looking at a lot of my friends' Facebook and Instagram feeds of them living in San Francisco, but then, being able to be in nature, walking along the beach within, I guess traffic dependent, 10, 20, 30 minutes is something that in New York, you kind of have to trick yourself into believing that, that swaths of the park are nature.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the ocean is a whole different deal. You can go out, you can go out to the beaches and, in New York, there's plenty of good beaches, but it's a different kind of thing. It's a different vibe. So I hear you, but New York's always great.
It's one of those things of over the past year of not really being able to go out and do anything, and being trapped in my apartment has made me kind of reconsider. Yeah. But it sounds like the beach in particular has been very healing for you.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote that short spiel that went with the one sheet for the ocean, and yeah, that was a saving grace, over the past couple of years. Once it was clear that Berlin was kaput, as they say, that was my sort of healing place, was out there. It's to be able to get up at 5 a.m. and go out and get out onto the ocean before the sun comes up, and just sort of all the majesty of how that unfolds for those couple hours each day is, pretty great. It was really kept me kept me sane. That and spending time down in the desert as well. Once it eased up a little bit at the end of 20, and we were able to at least drive within the state. The desert is another place I've been spending some time, and that's been really great. A lot of friends down there, a lot of San Francisco people down there now, and so that's been good. But yeah, no complaints. Ocean good, desert good. Going back to work, hopefully going back to work in 2 weeks. That'll be nice. Yeah.
And this is not a short tour. This is a real deal tour. I was looking down the dates, and you're on the road for a few months.
Yeah. I've got I got the 3 weeks in April out here in the West. I've got 2.5, 3 weeks in May on the East, in the Northeast. Then a month in the UK, and a couple. Just announced, just added a Helsinki festival, and there might be a couple more things coming, but that'll take up June. And then October, I got to make up that Southeast run that I had to push back from February because of the spike. So yeah, I did 2 years worth of touring in one.
What's the general feeling around that? Are you anxious? Are you excited? I mean, it's got to be surreal after 2 years of not doing this to just completely throw yourself into it.
Well, I mean, last fall there was we snuck a band tour in, at the second half of September, and then I did a run of solo shows in October. So I mean, I've been back out since 2 years ago, but I mean, on the artist side, it's really tough because so much of what live music is about has changed. Like 2 or 3 shows in, I was completely beat up, and my voice was beat up, and I'm like, why do I feel like I'm killing myself more than usual? And then I realized, it's because people are wearing masks, and I can't hear the feedback from the crowd. It was just like, that's right, they're half the volume now because they're muffled by masks. It's, okay, that's why I'm not getting the heat back. They're giving me the heat, I just can't hear it. Things like going out to the merch table to see your friends after the show, that was off limits. We had a bubble, and we couldn't leave we couldn't bring friends backstage. I mean, it was just all of the community aspect of it, beyond I'm a musician who works for a living making music, all the other stuff. It all changed, in an attempt to try to keep a safe space and stay healthy and actually get through the tour without incident, which we did. But man, it just didn't, it feels very different still. So having said all that, I'm super thrilled that we're sort of looks like we're back in business coming up. So, I mean, it's been wild. It's been wild.
Have you been able to, beyond that, I mean, have you been doing much writing? I know you had an album come out towards the beginning of all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Blue Hearts came out in September 20, and all of the Distortion box sets and retrospectives and all that started coming out in October of 20, and all of that kept me super busy when I wasn't touring. It's just interviews, more product management and all that. But in terms of writing, I got lots of loose notes right now. I don't feel like I finished the Blue Hearts cycle yet. And let me try to describe this. Typically my cycle is I sort of hermit myself away with all of my loose ideas and scraps of papers and melodies and, the videos and audios and all that. And I write a record, and then I get the guys together and we make a record, and then I start promoting the record before it comes out, and then I do the tour when it comes out. And with, that cycle got so fractured, I still don't feel like I've got the full feedback yet from Blue Hearts. So I think, getting out and hopefully getting to talk with people in real life at the shows now, I think that's going to help me get sort of get that cycle closed up so I can get started with the next one. But I mean, I've been doing that cycle my whole life. And this time, the last 2 years sort of broke that. So yeah, I lost momentum. I feel like I've got it back now, but yeah, long answer to a short question. Yeah, I'm writing, but I don't feel like I've dug in all the way yet.
But that's fair. Although, I'm noticing a common thread in terms of your answer to that one and your answer as far as actually playing live, which is this idea of feedback, which is certainly not something that I get from every musician, right? I mean, there's this kind of romantic ideal of doing it all for yourself and not being, super concerned about reaction and just sort of like going forward and really pouring yourself into your work. But it sounds like the reaction to the last record is a really important part of writing the next one for you.
Yeah, and I think as I become, as I'm now, I guess, incredibly tenured in my position. It's for decades I was so single-minded and did not really pay attention to feedback. I was so driven to do what I do, and somewhere in the last decade it was like, oh, and maybe I'm at that point in my life where it's okay to give the people at least some of what they want. They've been sort of hanging under my rules for 35 years.
Yeah, maybe that's not a super punk rock approach to things to give people what they want.
Take a request now and then, that kind of. So I guess that's what happens when you're tenured. You have to be considerate to the audience in a different way other than just delivering what you're delivering. It's nice to let. You know what I'm saying?
I think that can be the case, and I think that that's certainly the healthy approach to it. But I think just in general, when it comes to being creative or really any aspect in life, politics or even the kind of music that you listen to, people more often than not tend to get more dug in the older they get.
Yeah. I mean, it gets harder. New tricks are less likely to be found as time goes on. But I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about the way things are going to go on the next, towards the next record. I mean, I'm starting to see pathways. I'm starting to see just, giving myself over to, other people's media, just like, artists that I love and, new music that I hear. And, it's just that, I find with myself the when I get a little bit stuck on output, it's usually better to take stuff in. It's like those days, like the day where I wake up with a good idea and I'm working on it and it just goes to hell. Like I've either overworked it or it wasn't that good, or it's just I get frustrated. Then I'm smart enough now at this point in my life not to spend all day and night beating myself up about it. It might just be easier to go to SF MoMA and look at somebody else's work for an hour.
You're not necessarily like turning the radio on or listening to a piece of music.
No, it's just looking to nature, looking to other people's art, just looking to, just getting outside of the hermit box, at least for a couple hours. And then I might see something.
It could be inspiration, or a lot of times, I know that for my own work, just the simple act of, because I sit on my desk and write all day, and the simple act of standing up and walking away from my desk, and being away for a few minutes is enough to shake something loose. Yeah. So I mean, that's, I'm, more mindful of that, when I'm not putting out, it's better to be taken in. So that's when I go and I take other people's stuff in. And it's, because I mean, I for so long just turned away from pop culture and really tried to stay, I've operated in a vacuum in a way. I didn't really stay super up on music in the 80s and 90s. In the aughts when I started DJing and when I was living in DC, that I was taking in so much of other people's work at that time. Because the blow-off parties that I was doing with Rich Morel, that forced me to listen to other people's music for hours a day. Now, a lot of it was house music or electronica, but
that was a really great time for me just to be a fan of music again, even if it wasn't, if it was music that was not similar to what I normally make.
Was it difficult to listen to music, or, was it just not, you just didn't kind of have the time or put forth the effort?
With 80s and 90s, I was so busy making, I wasn't really up on what else was going on. I sort of wanted to keep my own head pure, I suppose. I mean, obviously being on Creation, I couldn't help but, My Bloody Valentine or Swerve Driver, they were my colleagues and I loved their music, but I wasn't as active a music fan as I was as a kid, or maybe when Hüsker started, when I still had that crazy fandom about music where, every Saturday was the record store day, Once I was making and touring and doing all that, I got real single-minded, I think, about, it's just like, I want my work to be pure. I don't want to be influenced by what's popular. I don't want TV and stuff like that. It just didn't interest me. It was, I had my little world where I was making stuff.
I think that's fair, though, because, how many artists have gone too far in that direction? It is easy to chase the trends.
Oof, yeah. I don't know. I agree, but I don't know what that's like. So, it sounds good. It sounds reasonable, but
it sounds lucrative.
Yeah, there you go. That's the word I was looking for. Sounds lucrative.
Obviously you've been a wrestling guy for a long time, and you were actually doing some writing, I think, over at WCW. What kind of impact did that have on your creative output generally?
Well, I'm a lifelong professional wrestling fan. I grew up with it. I grew up near Montreal, and I used to go up to the pro wrestling matches up there. When I moved to Minnesota, I befriended people in the main wrestling group at the time out there. And it kept, over the decades, it kept unfolding, and I kept meeting more people and more wrestlers and promoters and, creative people in the business. And they started asking, they would ask me for ideas because I think they sensed that I was pretty well smartened up, I guess is the term they used to use in the business, but that I was a student of the business. And in the fall of 99, a friend of mine at WCW called and said, we're having a change in creative direction. Do you want to come down and do consulting? And I'm like, yeah. And at that time, I wasn't, in 99, I wasn't touring. I had just sort of put the guitar down for a while and was living my gay life in the West Village in Chelsea. And, then I got the call to go run the road with the wrestlers. And it was a dream come true. And I was happy to go and just try to help out in any way that I could. I got down there, they saw my skill set, and they put me in a pretty important position at the company. And, like I said, I was trying to help. I did the best I could. I was there for 7 months. I saw a lot of crazy stuff. I think I helped some. When it was time, after 7 months, I realized that maybe I wasn't as effective as I had hoped I could be. And, they started going in a different direction, to hire some new people to come in to do creative. And I was like, oh, I did what I could. I'm out. But it's a wild world. Or back then it was a wild world. Now I think it's very, it's different. It's a different world now.
I mean, it must be nice after 20 years of, in some form or other, doing the same thing to try something completely creatively different.
Yeah, it was. It was great times. It was sort of like a way turned up version of rock and roll touring. Because those guys in the late 90s, those guys were crazy because there was so much money and so much celebrity, and just again, it was a different world back then. The recreational drug use, the enhanced drug use, just that lifestyle is and they're big guys, and it's a really physical this sort of violent business to be in, where you're basically you hand your body over to your colleague and you trust them with your life for 6 to 20 minutes every day. It's sort of nuts.